Are you ready to embark on a journey of success? To discover your true potential in the untold stories of careers in life sciences? Welcome to PATHFINDER by the Purdue Institute of Inflammation, Immunology and Infectious Disease. With your host, Tommy Soares, discover the untold stories of industry scientists and unveil the secrets to excelling in your career. Thank you for joining us once again, and remember to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Welcome, everybody. My name is Tommy Soares. I'm the Director of Scientific Strategy and Relations for the Purdue Institute of Inflammation, Immunology and Infectious Disease. And today on PATHFINDER, I have the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Greg Sullens, who is currently a clinical trial manager with Medpace Incorporated, where he leads cross-functional teams to seamlessly complete neuroscience clinical trials. He has worked on phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials within the fields of epilepsy, pain management, inhaled sedation, stroke, amyloidosis, gene therapy, and medical devices. Greg builds relations with leading doctors and healthcare professionals and serves as a trusted source for protocol and study-related information. He maintains accountability for all study timelines and serves as the liaison for Medpace and external parties involved in the trial. Greg completed a PhD in behavioral neuroscience at Baylor University, where he studied learning and memory deficits of epilepsy, cognitive aging, chemotherapy-induced cognitive impairment, and Alzheimer's disease in mouse models. In his spare time, Greg enjoys reading, sim racing, and is learning to enjoy exercise once again. Thank you for being on PATHFINDER today, Greg. It's a pleasure meeting you, and it's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Tommy. Appreciate that warm introduction. And if I can just get the formalities out of the way, please note that anything that I say here is my personal opinion and does not reflect that of my previous employers, current or future.
Fantastic. And thank you so much for saying that. Now that we got that out of the way, I am so curious about your development and how you got into the clinical trials piece. What's intriguing about it, and how clinical trials are changing in today's environment, especially as we came out of this pandemic and we saw clinical trials having to shift quite quickly due to some of those emergency products that we needed for our population. But it's so great to meet you, and it's great to really have somebody who works at a CRO, a contract research organization, that can explain to us a little bit about the mechanics there. Would love to know, what is your background? What's your past? What got you into neuroscience in the first place?
Of course. Yeah. So I got to go way back
Okay.
into the late 2000s when I was in college, undergrad. I was studying psychology and criminal justice. And originally I thought I wanted to go like the criminal justice route with the psychology background. But I did about 6 months worth of rat research in the psychology department. And I really enjoyed that. But also, by the time I was done with my undergrad, as I'm sure many people felt this way, I was kind of done with education. So I tried to go find a job, but this was the trough of the 2008 recession, early 2010s. There wasn't much out there. So I kind of leaned back on my previous high school, college jobs of being a lifeguard and wound up managing at a country club. And so that gave me some of my first managerial experience. And so that's one reason why I like to bring that up is I've had this background. But as I was working, I realized I really missed that science aspect. That was really where my heart was lying. So I actually applied for a terminal master's degree at Georgia Southern University. And I was accepted, and there I studied human memory. We tested in virtual environments, spatial reorientation and spatial memory.
Mm.
And I was like, science is awesome. This is what I want to do. I was right to go back in. So I applied for PhD programs. And so I wound up being accepted at Baylor University. Uh, and that PI was studying memory in rodent models. That's where kind of the aging aspects and chemotherapy aspects come into the play. Unfortunately, about a couple years into that experience, this PI got an amazing opportunity to go back to her home country in Canada.
Mhm.
And because of my life situations, I was unable to follow. So I transitioned to another lab that was studying epilepsy, and they allowed me to look at some comorbidities of epilepsy, some Alzheimer's like tau proteins, and
Mm.
that memory aspect associated because there's a lot of memory deficits with people in epilepsy. So they allowed me to kind of stay in that niche, but transition models. So key aspect that I learned from all that graduate experience was to be adaptable and flexible and learn how to apply the basic principles of science to anything that I'm doing. And that's really where transitioning into clinical trials came in and working for that CRO.
Mm.
So for those who don't know what a CRO is, a contract research organization, as you mentioned, Tommy, what we do is we partner with biopharma companies, biotech companies, and we run their trials for them.
Mm.
There's different things that we're scoped for depending on their needs, but oftentimes Medpace especially really likes to pair with small to mid-sized biopharm companies. So they're typically hiring us because they don't necessarily have maybe the network. They don't have all the KOL engagements or site engagements that we have available to us as we're doing this day in and day out for over 30 years now. So we have a lot of networking available to us,
Yeah.
especially with the diversity push now by all regulatory groups, including the FDA. Uh, that diversity inclusion is really pushing for more international, not just US based clinical
Mm.
trials. And with international presence, we can kind of help facilitate that. And so that whenever you go into industry, unlike being in academia, you don't necessarily get to work on your passion, your one little therapeutic area, right? And so all these trials that different therapeutic areas you mentioned, they're all overlapping for me. So I might have, this pain management and osteoarthritis study in one meeting, and then I hang up that meeting and go into my strokes. So I have to change gears very quickly, and that's where that adaptability and flexibility I learned in graduate school really comes into play.
Oh my gosh, there is so much excitement also when you're describing some of these past experiences. They must have really been so inspiring for you, Greg, eh? Especially as you drifted a little bit outside of science in this managerial role, but then you came back with so much, excitement and energy, right?
Yeah, it gives you a perspective. Everyone knows graduate school is a grueling, grueling process. But I was looking back and whenever I was in those downtimes, like, this is still better than what I was doing before. So I'm enjoying at least, the outcomes. I am working towards helping people by studying these therapeutic areas, even at the basic science level. That understanding gets published, right? And people who are making new drugs, new devices can read that, take that information into consideration to tailor their products to really help people out in the world. And that's kind of really where I find my passion is. I just want to make people's lives better. Any little bit of improvement that I can produce is amazing. And being in industry, it's a little bit more accelerated. I can kind of see that product, that outcome a little bit quicker than you might in academia.
I love that. I think that perspective is so important to know about too, especially for people who are maybe still in grad school that are thinking about industry, and to know that excitement level in industry is higher because you're so much closer to where the patient is going to benefit from your work, and you're going to get that, hopefully that feedback. You're going to see some light at the end of that tunnel for the work that you've been putting in. But I think you said something very important too, and I wonder if we can go back there. You said, when I was a grad student, even though it was difficult, it was hard, I had to stop and reflect and compare to what I was doing before. And what a privilege it must be, or it is, for scientists in their education and training to be able to tinker around in the lab and like do experiments and like like be day in and day out. That's your responsibility, is to delve into your curiosity and learn and just develop and discover. What a great way you put it, in that the reflection was like, okay, well, I could be doing a few things that would be 10 times worse than this. What was that? Because I think there's a lot of grad students here that need maybe a little bit of inspiration. And if it comes from a fellow scientist that's gone through that grueling work, hopefully they'll hear it. What were some of the techniques that you use to say, okay, stop, remember what it was like when you were in the sanitary department, or in you were, serving burgers, flipping, washing dishes, whatever it might have been. What were some of those techniques, Greg, that you think are useful for people?
Really just taking a step back, taking a moment to calm down, because you get worked up, especially when you get super frustrated and you're just ruminating on this one thing. Take a moment, take a breath. At Baylor University, the science building has this little pathway right around it. If I had the time, I would go outside and walk. So remove myself from the situation to
Yeah.
allow myself to get out of that mindset, and then just be like, okay, yeah, that's frustrating. That didn't work. Or, it might be disagreements with your PI, right? Where you see one thing, they see another. That's going to happen no matter where you are. Eventually, you have to do what your boss says, right? Um, but just taking that moment and to really lower your blood pressure, essentially. And then just be like, okay, yeah, that was bad, but as a manager, short-staffed, I'm not scrubbing toilets anymore.
Right. Right.
That's, that's something. And I don't want to knock anybody that's doing that. You know, our society needs people
Yeah.
doing that, of course.
Yeah.
But I find more satisfaction in what I'm doing now, even if there are these difficulties. They're
Yes.
temporary, there's these hard parts, but if we push through these hard parts, we're still getting to that end goal of,
Mhm.
helping drive science forward, which helps people in the end.
Yeah,
So
I
remember,
agree.
going back to that end goal of what am I doing and why am I doing it also helps.
I like that too, because that reflection is that, again, as you said, let's take that moment and reflect not only on like, oh, what I could be doing that might be better or worse, but also on like, hey, what do I have here in my hands? What kind of an opportunity, and what
Mhm.
am I going to make of this opportunity? Because not everybody has worked and kept up with the work to get to that level and that opportunity. So, Greg, did you do a postdoc at Baylor as well? Or no, you
I
went
did not.
straight from the PhD?
I went from Friday afternoon in the lab to Monday morning in the
No
office.
way. Are you serious?
I'm one of those people that I don't like too much downtime. I get
Yes.
bored. My
Yes.
boss always tells me to take my vacation. They have to remind me.
Well, because you must enjoy what you do. And so it doesn't seem like, oh, arduous work, if you're really having a good time doing it.
E- Exactly. And that's one thing, everyone says follow your passions, but again, realistic economically, you're not always going to find your perfect fit. So just find where you're going to be most happy.
Yes.
And I think both academia and industry have very important roles to play.
Yeah.
So if you're deciding, do I want to go academia? Do I want to go industry? One of the main things you probably want to ask yourself is, do I really value having complete control over what goes on in my research? Or am I more okay with somebody telling me, hey, this is what you're going to work on at this moment in time for XYZ reasons?
Mhm.
And so that amount of control, I think, is one of the driving decisions on whether you should pursue being a PI at an academic setting or doing something in industry, whether that be a scientist at the bench, because there are those opportunities, being more kind of operational, procedural in the background, kind of like I do now.
Yeah. So what are the best parts of both worlds? You know, obviously you have a lot of independence in academia to ask any question you want, and sometimes that creates a lot of maybe experiments that we shouldn't be doing. But also tell it like, do you see the best of both worlds? Do you see one being better? And maybe for you, tell us what was your experience as you transitioned from one lab into the other?
That's a great question. So, when I'm looking at pros and cons of academia, I actually really enjoyed teaching. I taught for 6 years from my master's program through my PhD, like lecture courses, not just, grading papers in the background. So, taking that experience, I have been able to take that and be a good mentor in my
Mm.
current role. So there are still teaching opportunities. But if you really enjoy being up and lecturing people and disseminating knowledge to a wider range of people, to help inspire them in what they want their path to be. Lecture positions, PIs who are more teaching focused at your slacks, those are gonna be great roles for you. Um, if you really want to, like I said, control your own research, being that research focused PI, writing your grants, of course, I say you have control, but you kind of experiment and find the grant committees that allow you to do what you want to do. You always have to answer to
Yes.
someone, right?
Yes.
So, but you do have more control. And so if you want to go that route and you're okay with, teaching every now and then, and again, there's going to be another mentor aspect, right? Because you're going to have postdocs, you're going to have graduate students,
Yeah.
undergrads at more undergraduate focused institutions like Baylor University. So there's still going to be those opportunities to mentor, if you enjoy doing that. And but I did not enjoy the grant writing process. And so industry did appeal a little bit more to me. I was successful in getting one grant, but I was just like, man, I don't want my career to hinge on this. I don't want a large
Yeah.
chunk of my salary to hinge on doing this thing that I don't really enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And honestly, I wasn't that good at it. I only got one, right? So, um, and that's one of the deciding factors for me because again, I really enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed mentorship, but not having to write grants is awesome. And kind of what I do now, I like to describe to graduate students as, that busy R1 PI that's always in their office on their computer. I'm that person without having to do the grant aspect, without having to
Right.
buy out of my teaching. Because what we do is we really look at protocols and we change things. We do suggestions based off of our not only individual experience, but our corporate experience as well.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
so think of that as like a graduate student or a postdoc coming to you with a protocol and you just tweaking it and refining it as a PI.
Yeah.
Um, and then making sure all of the equipment is ordered for the lab, making sure all that logistical stuff is in place. That's
Right.
part of my job too. I have a logistics team, but I have to coordinate all that.
Yeah.
So that kind of behind the scenes office work that, your typical PI does in academia, that's essentially my entire job. And I don't have to deal with serving on committees or anything like that. There are volunteer opportunities that I
Yeah.
do, but it's less burdensome.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And you said something that I think strikes a chord with all of us, which is, oh, you got to find your passion. And they give us this, go find your passion and your work will be like play and play will be like work. I tend to find that most people are passionate about what they're good at. Meaning that if you have, like, you knew you weren't good at proposal development, writing, and so on, and you didn't go there.
Mhm.
And that you saw it attractive that, okay, you don't have to do grant writing in industry, even though maybe that really depends on the size of company, because if you're in startup mode, you're probably still writing business plans and doing competitions and stuff like that, right?
Depends on where you're at. If you're with the biotech pharma, you probably do, but as a CRO, I don't have to.
I
So
see.
that's part of
I
the
see.
beauty of being part of the CRO is I don't have to worry about
Right.
obtaining the funding because the company is going to pay us directly.
That's right.
There are grant writers, of course. If you really enjoy just writing grants, there are those opportunities
Yeah.
within industry as well as academia. There's grant help at universities. So
Oh, for
um,
sure, for sure. And I teach grant writing as well, and I teach a course, and it's incredible at times that I'm teaching people mainly about the psychology, because a lot of the information is out there already on how to write a grant and the pieces, but it's like the psychology of how the reviewers are going to take what you're writing and so on. And in that respect, I think a lot of the techniques that we use in grant writing and proposal development, you can say in a way are like ways to sell your ideas, to sell you as the person carrying the ideas and responsibilities, but also the location of where this is going to take place. And, in the CRO framework, protocol writing and protocol development is very similar in that way. Tell us a little bit about how did you have to cope with that? And I know protocol is more, let's describe the experiment and the statistics and what samples and what frequencies are we taking and so on and so forth. But what are we talking about here, and how was that realization that you're like, oh, I might need to now work a little bit on some protocol development?
that's a great point. And part of it comes back to one thing that you mentioned about the grant writing aspect of putting yourself in the other person's shoes and seeing what they want.
Mm,
That isn't just for grants, that's for anything that you're doing, right? Have that empathy, really, to take that perspective, see what the other individual wants, and how can you achieve that. And that's part of the perspective you need to take while writing a protocol, because you're going to ask, okay, what are the primary endpoints, secondary endpoints, or exploratory endpoints that this protocol is trying to achieve?
yeah.
Okay, so that's what my clients, the people that own the product, want to get. All right, I'm reading through their items. All right, now let me put my clinician hat on who's actually going to be running this.
Mhm.
How can they best achieve that? What is realistic? Or what, as we say, we call it a risk assessment. What are the risks to actually being able to complete these endpoints? And so if we see something in the protocol, for instance, if you're working on a study that has imaging, say an MRI, right? And you want to have a baseline MRI, and ideally, in a perfect research world, you're going to get the MRI and then immediately go inject the knee or do whatever it is next
Right.
with your IP. Well, whereas the imaging facility is not in the same location as where
Right.
that IP is going to be administered. So you might need to build in a window of time for
Mhm.
allowable to get that MRI done. So that's part of, you write that into your protocol. And there becomes a balance of, well, how far in advance are we allowed to do it because of scheduling and people taking off work and things like that.
Mhm.
So you also got to put on the perspective of how is this affecting our participants, our patients. And so you kind of wear different hats to take that perspective while designing the protocol with that end goal of, I need to get the best, cleanest, most reliable data so that we can trust the statistics and the information that comes out of it for the FDA, EMA, whoever, to evaluate and make an informed decision on whether this should hit market or not.
Yeah, and I bet you so like that part is probably the most stressful part, is like, are we getting it all right? Are we collecting the right data, and are we presenting the data in a way that is convincing to the FDA that this is worthwhile, continue to explore or whatever, commercialize. I really like that, Greg. So you do are you at all the protocol developer? Do you sit with a protocol writer that then talks to the client, the company that's hired your company to conduct these clinical trials?
So vast majority of the time at Medpace, and I would imagine most CROs, is the client actually comes with a protocol mostly written already. There probably some tweaking that they've gotten back because oftentimes as they're hiring us, they're getting close to starting. So they've already submitted it oftentimes to the
Right.
FDA for an initial review to say, hey, FDA, does this look good? Do I need to change anything? So what we're really doing at this point is getting all of our experts, all of our functional area leads. So our biostats individuals. Here at Medpace, we actually have MDs with therapeutic expertise. We have them look at it from a clinician perspective. I look at it from an operational perspective. Again, the timing of different things. What do I need logistically? We have a lab group that looks at it to see what kind of labs, how much volume, all of those items to make sure that we have enough blood volume, because blood volume is specified in the protocol. Are we getting enough to ensure that we can run all of the analysis that are asked for? And so my job is, yes, to look at the operational aspects, but also to cross-functionally orchestrate the team for the review, collate all of our information, provide feedback to the company and say, hey, we know you have this. These are your ideas. Here's our recommendations. And then there's a discussion of back and forth, because sometimes we might recommend, best practices, but that might not be feasible for XYZ reason. And so there's always a give and take in any experiment. I'm sure everyone has realized that by now, that, ideal research almost never happens, right?
Yeah.
But we try and do the best as possible.
Yeah. No, and you made a point at the beginning of our conversation that FDA and I guess not only FDA, but us broader as a community and as a whole realize that diversity and inclusion needs to fold into the clinical trials as well. Tell us a little bit about that shift. What like this is it has repercussions for clinical trials that have occurred in previous years where we haven't been as conscientious about the diversity and inclusion aspects of them. How is that now changing the way we're doing things?
That's a great question. And so part of the major change, at least on my end, is targeting different organizations. We often think of our, major academic research institutions. So our Emory's, our Yale's, our USC's, Berkeley's, things like that, as being great places. And they are. They have a wealth of knowledge. So I don't want to knock them. But oftentimes the individuals that live within a reasonable distance of these places to go and seek their treatment and participate in these trials are your typical, stereotypical middle class Caucasian individuals. And so, and getting transportation to these places is not always the easiest depending on where you live.
Mm-hmm.
And so realizing that access is not necessarily the easiest thing for different individuals, we start targeting different private clinics or smaller academic institutions that are easier to access for individuals of different walks of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's part of it, of the kind of calculus, if you will, of who do we choose, who do we target to participate on these trials,
Yeah.
which KOLs or PIs, depending on your terminology, are we going to ask to be the doctors who actually see the patients, as well as I mentioned earlier, do I need to go international to make sure that I'm getting the population? So
Yeah.
if we know academically that, oh, this particular disorder or disease affects disproportionately individuals of Pacific Islander descent,
Mm-hmm.
well, maybe just conducting in the US is not the best idea. Yeah, there
Right.
might be pockets of that population that we can recruit from very well. But we actually probably want to go to Malaysia. We probably want to go into Indonesia, Australia, Japan, Korea, other places to make sure that we are really getting the data that will best fit the target population of those that we want to help.
Yeah, no, what an advantage to be in a CRO that has these branches globally that you can then recruit and accrue your volunteers to participate and be part of these trials. That's such an amazing thing. So are you working with international counterparts all the time? Are you in conversation with people from around the world and
Yes.
discussing these things? Tell us a little bit, because that must be so exciting too.
It is a great opportunity. I won't lie. Just being able to get, again, different cultural perspectives by talking to different team members and different considerations. What works for, that patient population schedule wise or anything like that might not work for us here in America because of, work-life balance differences or different tolerabilities of what people will accept as, all right, I'm willing to do this trial, but not this trial. So
Mm.
kind of learning that balance is very interesting. But the biggest challenge really is, time management with that. So get really good at that while you're there in your lab at the moment, because I work with actually individuals in Asia Pac as well as in Europe quite often. And so my time has to be a little bit more flexible because I also work with people on the I'm in Central Time, but I work with people in Pacific Time as well.
Mhm.
So my day, depending on it, might range from 6:30 in the morning until 6 at night, just depending on when I can schedule meetings with different people.
Yeah.
So being able to build in flexibility and then be productive during that entire time essentially is all right. I can have this meeting in between. I'll be able to review this protocol or answer these emails,
Yeah.
answer this question from this doctor, call
Yeah.
this doctor if it need be.
Yeah.
So you have a bunch of different tasks, and like I mentioned before, being able to switch back and forth, not just from one therapeutic area to another, but being able to switch from, okay, I'm going to do this task. Okay, now I have to do that task, and being able to go back and forth, kind of that mental shift really
Mhm.
is quite important.
But it's also so exciting. At least it sounds exciting to me. And it sounds like you're like a kid in a candy store, like where, okay, I'm done with this meeting. I entertained that curiosity and that part of me. Now it's time to shift to another story going on, another adventure that is taking shape. That diversity of projects is also so rewarding too, I can imagine. Especially as you said, um, be open at the beginning. You said be open to some of these experiences, but also the idea of being prepared and that the managerial experience that you got, even though it was at a country club, it still impacts you today. It was one of the first things you said in this conversation, and it struck me like, oh, you had an incredible experience at this country club, and you appreciate the moments that you went through there. What is it like managing, and what are these aspects? And what I can think of a lot is probably your communication style has evolved as you've moved through the ranks in academia and through the ranks at Medpace.
Of course, yeah. And part of, going back to that country club, part of learning how to do that communication style is, be gracious, and be kind with all your communication. That gets so much better than responses than trying to be berating, I don't, or rude, or it, there is a sometimes you have to be blunt, right? But there's a way to do it that gets your message across without being rude. And so part of my experience with that managerial role is communicating, maybe not so good things like, okay, yeah, per the rules that you as a member wrote, you're violating these. So how do I communicate that to tell somebody that, I mean, they're my clients, they're technically my boss because, what they're due is they're
Yeah,
paying me. How do you communicate that? Hey, you're breaking the rules, please stop,
right.
without, getting in trouble. And
Yes.
that's something that, you can take to any walk of life, any job. How do I communicate not just good things, but bad things as well, to individuals that is productive and is received correctly without really hurting relationships? Find anything like that in your background that you can take any little nugget. So as a learning and memory person, there's something you can take from every experience and it will shape you. Uh, so find those items, understand them, and then and then apply it to a broader aspect. And it doesn't have to be that one specific situation.
Yeah, no, no, totally. And it can also be like, as you said, you study memory and like looking at mice too, and
Mhm.
and doing those experiments. There's something about you though, Greg, that I think is super special that at least is coming across to me, and that I want maybe our audience to notice as well. And it's your attitude. It seems to me like your attitude is so positive, it's so open that you are allowing opportunities to come to you and taking those opportunities. And by this, I mean, I hear a lot of complaints from people saying, well, I can only work from such time to such time, or I'm only available. Like they make these blocks in their lives, and okay, people want to have this work-life balance and so on and so forth, but it's the attitude that you take to your work, I think, that allows you then to enjoy it to its fullest extent. And when you said, well, sometimes I have to be up at 6:30 in the morning and have a meeting with somebody who's across the world because that's their afternoon, that's their evening time for them. So I need to be respectful and mindful. How do we change some of the attitude of the people that are out there? Or can we change it? Can we find more Greg Sullens in the world that have this very healthy perspective of like, oh, if we need to accommodate, we will accommodate and stay flexible, which is what you said at the beginning.
Yeah, I want to start off with saying being flexible doesn't mean you're sacrificing your outside life. Being flexible just means that, just shifting around. So, if I have to be, there are rare times where I'm working a 12-hour day, but, if your company allows, what we call flex time, you might, leave an hour earlier, something like that on a different day. So arranging your schedule to find that work-life balance that you want to achieve for yourself is important. And again, that's why I like to use the term flexibility. I don't want to say this is what you're doing and that's no, being able to just adapt to the situation, be more fluid and less stringent. That way you don't feel like, oh, I'm doing nothing but work because I have this meeting and that meeting. If you have a meeting in the morning and maybe one late in the afternoon, maybe you take an extended lunch break and go to the gym or something like that. That's part of your you time, right? To help decompress. So again, adapt, be flexible, and shift to the situations. But I will say I am a pessimist by nature. I've actually learned to be more positive about my outlooks by, as we go back to the earlier discussion, by doing some of this reflection of, okay, there are worse things to be doing. I have such a privilege, such an honor to be doing something that I find great meaning in. So again, going back to that overall perspective of, I feel joy in maybe not the individual day-to-day certain tasks, but what it's leading up to. So have that bigger picture. Don't ruminate on the minute details that are really getting to you, because that's how you really go into a spiral. Look at the bigger picture. And, it might not be here and now, but you're working towards something later on down the road. Um, and so that's what I would say to the audience to really help change your pessimistic mindset to a more positive one is find that silver lining and always keep it in mind.
I was having this conversation with a previous Pathfinder guest, and he was talking about, the a big difference between academia and industry science is that in academia you have to be right. They push you to know everything and anything about a subject so that you are as correct as possible when communicating, when doing the research, and so on and so forth. But that's not so much the case in industry, in that the attitudes, and I'll come back to this attitude, yes, flexibility, but the attitude of, oh, there might be other people in this room that also have answers, and I'm not the only one that has all of the correct answers. And so that attitude has to change when you get to industry. Is you don't have to be right. You just have to get the work done and be as right as you can be for that period of time.
Yes, and I'll take it back to this is a mistake that not only myself, but a lot of people coming from academia into industry make. If somebody asks you a question in academia, you pontificate and speculate with the best available information that you have, because when you're being grilled on your dissertation, right, that's what they want you to do to show that
Yeah.
your breadth of expertise.
Yeah.
In industry, say, I don't know.
Mm.
That is a perfectly acceptable answer. And in fact, oftentimes that's what they want to hear,
Yeah.
because they might be asking you a question about data that's not publicly available right now. So
Mhm.
by saying, I don't know, I'm happy to look into that more, And that might be taking it back internally and asking some other experts on your team, or it
Mhm.
might be doing some more research on your own if you're in like an interview process and you want to follow up after the interview with that information. Be like, okay, yeah, I don't know, but I'm happy to take that back and find that information in your thank you letter 24 hours later. Be like, okay, I know this is what I found. It doesn't seem to quite answer your question, but this is the best available that I have.
Right.
So don't in the industry there are regulations and consequences for being wrong, not only financially for a company, but if you're in pharma and biotech, it's lives at stake.
Yeah.
So that I don't know is healthier than pontificating because if you're wrong, you might do harm.
Yeah.
And so remember that saying I don't know is sometimes the safest and best answer.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are scared of the I don't know answer because they're scared of looking like they are not as intelligent or they don't know as much or that they're not prepared. But the I don't know answer, it should be followed, I think, as you said, with but this is what I would do to find out, or let me look into that and let me come back to you with that. That solves the problem if there is a problem of lack of knowledge in a particular area. But it's honest. It's a truthful way, truthful approach. And I think that's what you're getting at. I think I've seen that work well in academia as well. Um, and I tell you because it was a technique that I remember using during my not dissertation, but my qualifying exam. I didn't know an answer. And I said, well, I'm not really sure the answer, but this is what I would do to figure it out. And they really liked that
Mhm.
approach because it's honest and it really like we're not supposed to know everything, right? And I think that makes us human as well, but that you're willing to go and chase it and try to find some more information for them, or this is how you would work it out, seems to be a healthy way of conducting yourself in that situation.
Exactly. And remember by saying, I don't know, and following up with, as you said, a way to find out. As a graduate student, you're being trained how to find out the correct information and which sources to trust and how to verify which sources to trust if it's a news source.
Mhm.
So really that lean on that experience, I mean, because not every source is truthful, right? And not every source
Yes.
is reliable. So make sure that you're vetting the information and you know how to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
So trust the process and highlighting your process can be helpful.
Yeah, that's a great, great piece of advice. And so if you are in industry, I mean, clinical trials, as you said, you cannot make too many mistakes there because it's people's lives and it's really serious stuff. What is the best way to work with a team? I mean, there must be a lot of trust within the company that everybody's pulling their weight, everybody's doing what they're doing in a truthful and in a way that shows integrity, right?
Correct. Yeah. And so we have internal processes to check things. Multiple people put eyes on protocols and other study plans. But to trust the process even outside. So whenever we are hiring or working with these sites that are actually going to see the patients, because as a contract research organization, we never make a product, right? And we never see a patient. We're this middleman in between.
Right.
Um, but we do send out what we at Medpace call our CRAs or our clinical research associates. Other companies call them clinical monitors or something like that. But these individuals are going out and looking at case books to make sure that everything makes sense and that, the doctors, the nurses typically still hand everything down on paper.
Hmm.
And then it has to get transferred to an electronic data capture system or an EDC, you might hear. So verifying that there's no human errors in writing things down in the transfer process, that's one of the checks and balances, is there's another set of eyes to look for discrepancies, look for weird things, and make sure that everything is copacetic and no one's trying to do funny things, because those casebooks are going to be reviewed multiple times. So somebody's, going to go back in and change something, that's going to get caught.
Right.
So there's a checks and balance system. And I want to say 99.9999999% of people are trying to do the right thing. And it's just those rare instances of, maybe somebody trying to make, maybe they have an invested interest in a product that they're not disclosing, or they did disclose, but they want certain data to come out.
Yeah.
Again, extremely rare. Don't let that worry you if you're listening to this and like, oh, I shouldn't trust clinical trials. It's extremely rare. Most people are doing good stuff, but for that, 0.0001% or whatever, that one person out of 2 million, we have checks and balances to catch that.
Yeah.
And so trusting your team that they've been trained properly, and Medpace has a great training program. That's one reason why I joined them, is because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Let me get trained how to do it
Yeah.
properly. And so, that is just very valuable. And because we have all these trainings and internal processes, I'm very confident in the individuals that we have that are doing the right thing, doing it correctly, doing it on time, and what we're putting out and giving to the powers that be to make informed decisions for the populace. I
Yeah.
trust what's coming out.
Yeah, that's great. And are there particular areas or disease areas that you know Medpace has strengths in, or that they focus in? And if you're a medium-sized company, even I would say a small transitioning to medium-sized company, medium to larger size company, uh, how do people get involved, and do they call you? Are there particular other channels that these companies would access Medpace services?
Yeah, great question. So we do have a business development team that will, collate all the different trials that we put together so they can show where we have expertise to certain companies. And so they might every now and then reach out to companies, but oftentimes it's a company saying, okay, I'm ready to start this trial. And they request us to bid, essentially, kind of like you might have
Mhm.
different contractors bid on building your house. We bid for different companies to do different projects against other CROs.
Yes.
And so different, most of the time we have to then justify, hey, this is why I'm best, because I have this experience.
Mhm.
And that's when we pull in our business development people. They give us all the stats on the trials that we've done, what phases we've done,
Sounds
if it was
like a
approved or not.
proposal. It sounds like a
Exactly.
proposal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we do call it a bid proposal,
Yes.
in fact. And again, there's a bunch of different team members with all their areas of expertise that go into doing that. But companies can look us up. Of course, if the FDA, it's been submitted, all that's public available knowledge, so they
Yeah.
can look that up. But we do have a business development team. So if you're with the company and you're considering different CROs, reach out to Medpace Business Development. They have their own webpage, and they can give you all the nitty-gritty information that you so desire.
Uh,
That
uh,
we're, of course, allowed to release because of non-disclosure agreements. So
sure.
there are some limitations on what kind of information we can share,
Sure.
but the basic information about our expertise, we're more than happy to share it with you.
Okay. Okay, great. And that's good to know. I hope that there are some listeners out there that are thinking, okay, is it time yet for us to conduct this trial and move it forward? But as you said, most of them are coming already with a protocol that is in good shape for you guys to maybe touch up a little bit
Mhm.
and then move it forward. Do you also give them guidance on this, like, hey, okay, so you have this protocol, but we're going to maybe need to open this up in other countries as well to build in this diversity inclusion piece to it? Is that part of the work that you guys do as well to help them?
It is. In fact, that actually starts at the proposal stage. We look at what the disease state is, what the target population is, and we build a list of sites and countries even to say, hey, this will meet diversity inclusion, and this will meet enrollment goals. And so there's a balance between how many sites to open to quickly enroll, because time is money, right? And so you want to have this balance of, because also opening up a site costs the company money. So you don't want to open up more than you need, but you want to open enough to get your study done in the quickest, but also safest and most ethical manner possible. So we look at all these different factors when proposing, hey, do you want to go international? If you want to go international, here are some countries that we would recommend with sites and doctors that we would recommend working with. If you want to keep it just US, which often phase 1, phase 2s are, phase 3 is really where a lot of that diversity inclusion really gets pushed, because that's your pivotal trial. That's what the FDA is really going to analyze for going to market. And so there are different considerations when you're looking at different phases of studies.
Yeah, so it's so intriguing and such a wonderful world to be in and to learn about, Greg. This has been absolutely an educational experience for me as well. Dr. Greg Sullens, who's a clinical trial manager at Medpace Incorporated. Thank you for being our Pathfinder today. And if there are any questions that I missed that you wish I would have asked, please let me know.
Of course, yeah. Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking with you, Tommy. And if anybody wants to reach out on LinkedIn, please hit me up. If you have additional questions, I'm happy to connect with you and answer what I can.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Greg. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You do the same.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us once again, and remember to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel.